that today's inaugural IMO International Day for Women in Maritime. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Nautical Institute Southwest branch, where we have a presentation currently provided by Antil. As ever, if you're not a member of the Nautical Institute, please do consider joining us. And Anne, for everyone's notification, this is being recorded. You can turn your camera off if you wish. If anyone does get bounced out, I'll be watching the screen and bring you guys back in again. So the floor's all yours, and let us know when you're complete, and we can have an excellent Q&A at the end, no doubt.
Fabulous. Thanks, Gordon. I will start by admitting that I was slightly trepidatious when Gordon suggested this. I have spent pretty much my entire career so far not trying to single myself out as a woman. So the idea when Gordon said, would you like to come and speak to Southwest branch about your career in maritime so far, it kind of filled me with horror and dread, but he, persuaded me very nicely, and it was suitably far enough in the distance that I thought, okay, I don't have to worry about it yet. So cue now, we are in the middle of May and it's happening. So apologies in advance for me possibly looking like I'm hating most of this.
And you're doing fantastic, because I've seen you present at various webinars and mini conferences and you've always got something special to say, so we're all looking forward to it.
Thank you, Gordon. Normally I get to hide behind technical things like autonomous ships and safe ground, but here we go. This is the uncomfortable one, and we've all got to be out of our comfort zones every now and again, and this is it for a while, I guess. So yeah, who am I? Who's this random woman coming to speak to Southwest branch? I chose these two pictures because, funnily enough, these were taken on the same day, middle of last year, pretty much. And I actually happen to think I look quite different in both, even though they were taken only a few minutes apart. So I will get the elephant in the room out the way. I am wearing 4 stripes in the picture on the right-hand side. I've never sailed, or I've not yet sailed as a captain. I hope desperately to remedy that, but basically have the ticket, had all the recommendations for promotion, and I will not name the company, but was told that the head of nautical in said company had decided that as long as he was there was never going to be a female captain. So I came ashore for 1 year to get some complementary experience and then try again, and then got stuck in this shore career trap of ending up doing far too many interesting jobs. And here I am 10 years later, still here ashore. So I do still hope to remedy that. At the same time, I've been an offshore superintendent for a number of years, where I was coaching captains and auditing captains. So it was a bit of a sort of leapfrog in a bizarre way. But as a bit of background, ever since the age of 4, I decided that I wanted to be a captain. At the time, I said I wanted to be the captain of a P&O ferry, because that was my world in terms of ships at that age 4. Probably quite glad with current events that I'm not a captain of a P&O ferry, but anyway. So that's me now, and I get quite uncomfortable sharing any photos of me. So this was a bit of a self-discovery, going back to have a look at some pictures sort of throughout my career. I was trying to work out what has made me through the years. So I've spoken quite a few places, as Gordon just mentioned, about STEM and trying to get women into STEM. It's something I'm quite passionate about, inspiring youngsters in general, male and female, in a career at sea. So I'm trying to make this presentation light. I don't really want it to be heavy. We could easily sit here and do 45 minutes of a very heavy, negative, depressing situation about what it can be like for a woman at sea, and that is not my intention. So I thought what better way than to kick off with a few pictures resembling my career to date. So top left there, I was a fresh-faced 17-year-old just back from my first or second trip to sea. I can't quite remember now. And yeah, right the way through to, well, the third picture on the top was me 2 weeks ago offshore Kuwait. I did 6 OVID inspections of some tugs that I go out in OVID every year for a client, and they're very, very gracious to me and let me have a little play every now and again. So that's probably one of my favorite pictures lately, to be fair. The top right is me playing in my day job. So my day job is working in autonomous shipping, working for a company called Ocean Infinity. We're building a whole bunch of remotely controlled vessels, basically building on the experience of operating little baby radio controlled vessels, very similar, in fact, identical to some of the ones that you'll see in Plymouth Sound. That's a ASV built sea worker there, and we have 8 of them. So every now and again, they let me go play with them, which is quite good fun as well. But truth be told, I'm probably quite happiest in my element in a boiler suit. Probably the bottom left is me in my absolute happy place. Rigger boots, PPE shorts, and doing fun stuff, which I don't get to do too much of anymore, sadly. So again, I need to rectify that one day. So I started off as a fresh-faced 16-year-old deck cadet, which was 20-something years ago now. And the ship on the top left was my first ship. As I say, I had great fun putting these few slides together. So that was the Chiquita Straits. That was my first ship, crossing the Atlantic, banana boat, sort of classic general cargo, break bulk, containers, bit of everything. So this is a good experience with them. Did a bit of time research boat up off Greenland in the ice, great fun. The Red Hold boat was my first ever offshore vessel, offshore PSV. She's now scrapped as well. Ended up in ferries, then Maersk Supply for a very good 6 or 7 years, before becoming offshore superintendent in a roundabout way for Bourbon with their green boats. So I put these photos together as a kind of, I realized that each one of these ships for me represented a career milestone or a life milestone, and I saw them as happy ships. And I've got great memories from each of the ships. And then as I looked, I realized I also had bad memories from each of these ships where things were difficult. And yeah, we all have memories from different ships and different workplaces, and life never goes smoothly no matter where we are. But every one of these ships, I realized that something negative had happened to me on each one of them purely because I was a woman in one way or another. But at the same time, I don't want that to overshadow the fact that for one reason or another, these are the ships that actually generally still make me smile. And actually, I realized afterwards that these are the ships that nothing really serious happened on. So I think it's quite telling that the ships that make me smile are actually the ones that the really, really bad stuff didn't actually happen on. So I had great fun putting that slide together. So those were the 2 sort of indulgent slides. And you'll see I'm not making this text heavy. This is definitely picture and anecdote heavy. So it's a bit of a swing the lamp session. Apologies in advance. So when Gordon first suggested the idea, I sort of had a few ideas in my head, and I was on a plane, I think heading down to South Africa at the time. So I jotted down some notes and left them at that for quite some while. And then I started canvassing around other female seafarers, former seafarers, to ask sort of what light-hearted stories could they think of about life at sea and life in this industry. So this is a before the watershed talk, so there's certain stories that didn't make the grade, but I will be down for the AGM if anybody wants to hear those in the bar at some point. One of the surprising but quite common stories that kept coming up time and time again was the amount of women I know that have had the when to do your laundry dilemma. And it turns out that a significant number of us, have stories of missing knickers and bras. And I was on a COPE meeting yesterday, which is the Centre for Ocean Policy meeting, and we have a work group. And there was a woman from ISWAN there that was saying that they're going to relaunch a certain website they had where seafarers swapped stories. And I had a quick look, and sure enough, there was yet another story about missing underwear, as if I needed a bit of validation for this slide, I think. So there's been a surprising amount of crew members who've told me that they've had others volunteer to wash female underwear with a very impressive array of reasons. But the best story of all was told to me on a WhatsApp voice note. And I have to admit, I was in a pizzeria in Cape Town at the time when I listened to this voice note, and I was pretty much in stitches. And I will not be able to tell it as well as the woman that experienced it, but she was third officer, and she popped down to get her washing in the middle of the afternoon to find the captain and the chief engineer, glasses of wine in hand, with the captain dancing around the alleyway with her bra on, of which she said quite tactfully that her training so far had not actually helped her work out what to do in the situation when the captain is there slugging a glass of wine wearing your bra. So it was one of the more humorous ones, but there is a serious side that there are many of us that seem to have lost underwear. Quite what fellow shipmates do with this underwear before they go home is another strange fact I'd love to know the answer to one day, and probably never will. But so then I got thinking a little bit more, and next one up had to be sanitary products. Now I've got a few stories of these, and again, most of them are not actually my own. But imagine for a 4 or 6 month trip, how much space in luggage pads take up. And we can think of, I've joined ships where you're joining by chopper, so your bag has to be small, certain size, 15 kg maximum, and then you're going away for a 4-month trip. So that's one dilemma. Then one of my mentees was in Egypt, and she got stuck on a ship in the pandemic. She was supposed to be there for 3 months, and she ended up being there for 9 months. And of course, midway through the trip, then faced the dilemma of having to go to the all-male crew to say that, and there was no shore leave, of course, it was the middle of the pandemic, to try and organise for the agents to bring on some sanitary products for her. And of course, she was a cadet and from a non-European culture as well. So she found it quite uncomfortable, of course, to even ask in the first place. Another colleague of mine, she asked the question on her first trip to sea about where she should dispose of used sanitary products. And the chief officer apparently was quite flustered. He'd obviously not had this question before, and came up with the answer, well, can you not just keep them in your bathroom cabinet for a while? Only problem is she was en route to Antarctica for several months. So she did try to explain what that might smell like and the hygiene implications of keeping them in her bathroom cupboard for several months. And they came to some arrangement in the end. But it's certainly one of the things that I often, when I'm on ships and I look at garbage management plans during audits and inspections, I specifically, I'm one of these sad people that like to read garbage management plan details anyway, but I do specifically look to see if there are disposal requirements for female sanitary products, especially if there are females on board, but not just because of that, because I one day hope we have an inclusive enough industry that we don't have to wait for a female to join to suddenly somebody think, oh, we need to change the garbage management plan, and we need to think of this. So I've heard of crew on passenger ships that have had to go to passenger toilets for disposal means. Coming to think of it, I think I probably even did the same when I was on Ropax ferries, to be honest, because we never certainly had waste bins in our cabins. And then that's before naturally we can go on to discuss difficulties of women working through monthly period pain, which can for different women be either a minor inconvenience or pretty damn difficult to work through. or even running out of, I mean, I mentioned long trips and running out of sanitary products. There's also the issue of running out of your contraceptive pill, which, yes, has one purpose for preventing babies, but it has also many other medical purposes for women as well in regulating hormones. And that's another thing that is not carried in shipboard medical chests. And again, one day I would hope that medical chests as standard had at least a base level of female sanitary products in case of need, at the very least. But I want to keep this positive. I really hope we will, and I think we are starting to talk in the industry about positive changes, which leads me very nicely on to my next slide, actually, about PPE. And several of you may have seen the announcement from the latest ILO, IMO tripartite MLC meeting. Crew connectivity's got quite a lot of attention for good reason. However, one other aspect which hasn't been quite so well publicized yet is the fact that MLC will require companies to keep a PPE in a range of sizes, including for women on board. And I personally, I'm as pleased with this as I am about the crew connectivity. I, for a number of years, obviously had only ever worn male PPE for a start. There were no such things as female cut boiler suits. And I remember getting my first female cut boiler suit. This image, literally from last month, is by Red Wing, that Scandia have been doing them for a number of years. I bought one for myself and suddenly wondered why we hadn't had these before. You would think that physiology were not hugely different. It's the little things, like on a typical boiler suit, how your pockets are cut through and go all the way through to your thigh, which has its advantages. However, if you are working in the Arabian Gulf and you don't want to wear a pair of shorts under your boiler suit, you have not much choice as a woman unless you want to show off a large amount of thigh and various other bits potentially to people. The crotch tends to be in a much different position, which is not ideal. And then obviously for some women, there is the issue of male boiler suits not quite being the same dimension in the chest as some women could need. I have to admit, this is not a problem for me. So I'm not speaking from experience here, but certainly there's a number of women out there that have told me that, yeah, this is a significant issue, especially with boiler suits. I had an email from a female cargo surveyor a few days ago, and she was saying her difficulty in trying to find safety boots because she's a size 2 in safety boots. And I thought I struggled being a size 4, but no, she's a size 2. So it's high time that we started addressing this. And it's not just a female thing in some respects. There's a lot of, especially Asian male seafarers, who can be very small as well. And I've often seen drowning in oversized coveralls. So it will be interesting to see how far the PPE discussion goes, certainly. One of my main issues used to be firemen's outfits, typically coming in a size 9 or 10 boot, normally large or extra large trousers and jackets. I spent a number of years, obviously, on the muster list designated in a fire team. I can tell you that trying to walk upstairs with a charged fire hose with oversized trousers and size 10 boots, you do resemble Donald Duck, and you are very lucky if you get to the top of the stairs in one piece, especially with a heavy charged fire hose. I'm not suggesting that suddenly every ship needs to have a range of fireman suits and outfits in general in various sizes, but it is certainly an issue. I've had the same with immersion suits, for that matter. The one size fits all immersion suit, I don't quite think fits all, in all honesty, with the ones I've worn. I could have put an amusing photo of me in one on here, but it would have been far too embarrassing, so I chickened out on that one. But there's a number of tales of similar, and actually, if any of you speak to Gillian Carson-Jackson when she's down for the AGM, ask her about her immersion suit story. She has a particularly good one about the problems of sizing of immersion suits with her Canadian Coast Guard experience. So I've kept it lighthearted. I've done some nice stuff. This is my one slide that's probably the serious-ish one, because I can't cover what it's like to be a woman in a maritime world, especially on board, without giving this one a mention. I've personally had everything from crew trying to woo me with chocolates bought at duty-free at Botlek, through to direct sexual assault and rape. So I'm pretty much, you can't get much of a broader spectrum than that, I suppose. I can remember the start of some of the problem men. I've had instances like the chief coming to the bridge and coming close to me in the chart room, sort of in the middle of the night, sort of brushing up against me, wearing nothing but a pair of silk boxers, which, apart from being in questionable taste, which they definitely were, that was the kickstart of worse. So it's rarely it doesn't happen overnight, let's put it this way. These days, it can even start with Facebook Messenger and WhatsApp. Again, I mentor a number of mentees. Most of them are women, and then some of the stories I've heard from them have been advances by people being added on Facebook from a crew member and suddenly getting messages of, I want to kiss you, I'm having sexy dreams of you, and all this sort of stuff, which, when you're stuck on a ship with nowhere to go, it can obviously feel very isolating. And just a little sort of fly the flag for mentoring here, it means that, thankfully they had somebody that they could go to for support. I've even heard it from men, actually, where I know of a man, funnily enough, he's a trustee of Safer Waves, who I'm going to mention in a minute, who used to work on a cruise ship and had a male steward who took a particular fancy to him and would cold call him and put love letters under his cabin door. So I think the message here is, this is a Women in Maritime Day, but there are quite a number of issues that, whilst they predominantly affect women, they can also affect men, and it's certainly not exclusive to the female gender, and there's lessons that we can learn for everybody. And that's certainly one of the messages I like to push out in terms of psychological safety, prevention of bullying, harassment. It's certainly not a gender issue, and at the same time, sexual harassment obviously is something that does tend to affect women more than men, being a minority. However, a female that's going through psychological distress because of that can end up putting shipmates at risk as well. It's not just obviously the long-term implications that it can happen for them as well. So I just like the message to say that, it's not okay. Unfortunately, many women in maritime do know what it's like to feel unsafe, threatened, assaulted. More women than not that I know that have been to sea have experienced it, and that is not okay. It's becoming less of a taboo. There are more anecdotes out there. If you want to read more, there's the MLAA website, there's Safer Waves website here in the UK that we've got accounts. So I'm certainly not going to go into any more details. They're out there, worth a read, I would say, to see really what it's like. Certainly the Safer Waves account actually has at least one account from a male seafarer who was at sea in the 60s as well. So again, it's not necessarily just a female issue. And I do mention charities such as Safer Waves. It's not just because I'm a volunteer for them, but when I was at sea last, we didn't have charities like Safer Waves around. And Safer Waves provides emotional support for any seafarer, male or female, that has experienced gender issues at sea. That simply didn't exist. I remember, when I first went to sea, I didn't even have signal on a mobile phone, so I couldn't call for help if I wanted to, or email for help. So we have advanced so much in communication availability, and certainly more now with MLC trying to make it a right for seafarers to have connectivity, that these emotional support services are certainly have more and more of a place. But spread the word. We need more people to know about them. So if you know of cadets, junior officers, senior officers for that matter, female especially, but anyone really, let them know that it is out there. You never know when they might need it. So this one, yes. Not all the issues certainly can be sexual. Some are purely just down to differences in attitudes, beliefs, cultural ideas. Obviously, one of the great things about maritime is that it is a culturally diverse global industry, and there is so much we benefit from multiculturalism, working with different cultures. You know, it's rich in diversity in that regard, but that can come with issues as well, of course. I say that thinking back, and actually many of the issues, probably the majority of the issues I have had from men have actually been white British males. So you could argue quite how much the cultural thing fits in, but certainly when I walk up a gangway, I'm aware that people will see me generally as a woman before they see me as a seafarer. It's no different to a woman going into hospital and seeing a male midwife, and seeing him as a man before seeing the fact that he's a midwife. So it's not exclusive just to women in the maritime industry, but for both sort of instances, you kind of steel yourself to realizing that there's going to be surprise, and then there's going to be questions about whether you're up to the job. And the reason I've got the slices of lemon here is to remind me that I remember as a cadet, I was quite a senior cadet at the time. I remember being told vociferously by a captain that my only critical job on board each day was to slice lemon for the bridge fridge, because he liked sliced lemon in his iced tea, and that was a woman's job. And I wasn't to touch any bridge equipment. I wasn't to write anything in the logbook. I was either to be on the bridge wing on lookout for 8 hours a day, or I was to slice the lemon. And as far as him, that was the woman's job. So what that taught me is life as a woman certainly does hand you some lemons at times in this industry. And I'm not going to be corny and say I made lemonade with them, because I certainly didn't. But I did slice the lemons, and I did persevere, and I'm still here trying to persevere now, 2 decades on. Maybe perseverance, maybe stubbornness. I was told on several occasions I shouldn't do manual work because I was a woman. So my answer to that was, if the bosun carried 1 paint can, I would go carry 2 paint cans. My husband would probably agree that I haven't changed much in 20 years. So I'm still pretty much like that. But at the same time, I'll often forget I'm a woman. You do. I see myself as a seafarer. When I'm on board, I'm a seafarer. And to me, I'm one of the crew. And to many others on board, I have to say, I'm also seen as one of the crew. And that's lovely. But then there's to some that I'm a woman, whether it's sexual desire, whether I'm seen as bad luck, because I've been told it several times that, a woman on board's bad luck. Please, can you leave the ship? You're bad luck for us. I've been told that women are only on board because they're promiscuous and they like to play the field. At the same time, I've been told that women only like to be on board because they must be lesbians, which always intrigues me, because if you choose to be on a woman on a ship full of men, I wouldn't have thought it was a natural place. But the incongruity of the fact that both ends of the spectrum are often thrown at me and just seems to chuckle me every now and again. So different biases, different opinions. I will accept they do cloud opinions, and that's part of, I think, the IMO's message about breaking down barriers, which is the aim of this day. I spent 5 years doing ship inspections in the Middle East, loved living in the Middle East, but I did grow accustomed to the frequent gawking. My husband was also a fellow surveyor with me, and 90% of the time, when we would survey a vessel together, the assumption would be that he was the surveyor and I was the secretary making notes. I will admit I didn't refute that. I played it totally to our advantage. it would leave me alone to actually look at what was really going on, and he'd be trailed by 5 superintendents and about 10 crew members normally. And then at the end, we'd hit them with a deficiency list, and you'd suddenly realize the penny would drop. There'd be times where I just wasn't allowed into the port because I was told, oh no, we don't allow women after dark. We don't allow women in Ramadan. And then there was a time when I had to go offshore to do a survey, and I had 3 local immigration officials all there in their garb, telling me that women can't work on ships. And why was I in a boiler suit? Women shouldn't be in boiler suits. And they were probably linked to the same officials, actually, because it was the same emirate, who told me that a woman couldn't be on the crew list for departure. So I had to leave the vessel. When I was client rep on that vessel. We were sailing from the UAE to Qatar at the time. So in the end, we sort of scratched our heads on board and thought, how can we get past this? And the answer was that they signed me on as a passenger, which was perfectly all right by the officials. So I left Dubai as a passenger and I arrived into Ras Laffan as a client rep. So it's still my most impressive promotion to date, I have to say. So yeah, it's a Women in Maritime Day. It's not a Women Seafarer Day. So I did want to briefly cover the fact that of the many women in non-seagoing roles who also have it tough and also are inspiring, both to me and to others. I've spent now a number of years straddling both worlds. I like to think I'm still a seafarer. I still want to be, but I have to admit I've been ashore 10 years. And the difficulty that came into my mind was meetings. And I'm not conscious of the fact a lot of the time, but every now and again I will sit in a big meeting and I'll suddenly realize that there'll be 10 or 20 men in the room, and yes, I will be the only woman. And some days it's humbling, some days it's frustrating, some days it feels like we're not making progress in the industry. It still comes as a shock every time I realize it. You'd think by now I would realize that there are still few of us in a lot of sectors in the industry, not all, but quite a few, but it still surprises me. But it reminds me that there's more to be done, and that, to be honest, just inspires me to try and inspire others to go join the fun ride that is maritime, to be honest. A little bit luckier where I work, we have this initiative that was set up called Women's Hour. Initially, I wasn't sure, a bit like Maritime Day, really, because I didn't like the idea of being singled out and it being this exclusive sort of club. But soon realized that the power was in sharing experiences. And I suddenly thought with horror that I'm one of the more senior women in the company, both in position and age, ironically, and suddenly realized that others were telling me that they were gaining a lot from what I was telling them. And I suddenly realized that it's this power in sharing. And there's this heavy focus on self-improvement, supporting one another. And so I'm now turned, and I'm a full supporter of it. And we've extended it out to men as well now, to allies, to help walk on the journey of trying to improve the gender diversity in the company. So it's great. But that's another sign that there is progress. And I certainly believe that for all the downsides that there are, we are seeing glimmers of hope in progress. Just looking at time, sorry, I'll try and be quick. I was discussing with some female colleagues as well what other stories came to mind, and there were different versions of the same sort of thread of us not being, or us being seen through, basically, and not being believed as a seafarer. And I can think of several for myself, where there was once I came back to the ship late at night in Equatorial Guinea, and despite the security having the crew list, he refused to believe that I could possibly be a woman working on a ship and wouldn't let me board my own ship. I had the same in Durban, funnily enough, which was quite surprising because South Africa has quite a lot of female participation in maritime industry, especially seagoing. And then a friend of mine reminded me of something that I'd forgotten, but has certainly happened a number of times, where you arrive at the airport and you have the drivers or the agents holding up the sign, with your ship name. So you go to them and they look straight through you and you say, oh, whichever ship name. And they say, oh, yeah. No, but we're looking for a man, because only men obviously join cargo ships. There was the garbage man. I always remember him quite fondly, bizarrely, in Nigeria, who refused to believe I was the chief mate. And he needed my signature on the garbage receipt, and the chief mate needed his signature on the garbage receipt. And I'm presenting him the garbage receipt. And no, he went to the captain. He said, no, I want to speak to the real chief officer, and wouldn't sign my garbage receipt. Thankfully, the master basically said, well, you sign the chief officer's garbage receipt or you get off the ship. But in the end, I sort of looked down my boiler suit and probably made him blush and said, no, I'm definitely still a woman, sorry, and I'm definitely the chief mate. So that's, that is what it is. So it's a common thread. A lot of us seem to have similar stories of various places around the world, and I'd forgotten most of them until we got started talking about them for this presentation, funnily enough. It's not even external people. I was a newly joined chief mate at the time of a PSV in the North Sea, and the Danish captain joined, a new joiner, and he thought I was the cadet and asked me to carry his bags to his cabin, which I dutifully did, being me. And he said to one of the crew members, oh, she's a young woman, she can carry my bags to my cabin, and just totally assumed I was the cadet. He was very apologetic in his defense when he realized that I was actually the second in command and not his cadet. But I did still carry his bags, and I'm glad I did. Just very, very quickly. Yes, there are then the strange sides of being women at sea. Seem to be a number of us that have had various marriage proposals along the way. I remember when AIS first came in, and this was this big novelty that you could send text messages to ships on AIS, and you get all sorts of random garbage come through. But after I'd been speaking on the VHF, I don't know, port control or somewhere for a while, I got messages from a ship saying that I was the most beautiful sounding woman he'd ever heard, and would I marry him? I don't think I even knew his name, to be fair. I've had marriage proposals from paint gangs in Central America. Then there's the catcalls from stevedores. I had a guy on a dock road somewhere in the States, Freeport, I think it was, try and grab me on the side of the dock road and take me into his van. Thankfully, that could have gone very, very horribly wrong, but thankfully didn't. So there's certainly sort of more nuanced issues that come about. And then I did just want to mention briefly the fact that I'm sharing all these stories because I'm quite lucky, and a lot of my colleagues are lucky, that we were able to get our cadet berths. We were able to enter the industry. We were able to get sea time. There are a lot of women who are still struggling to get sea time because of either companies that just do not take women at all. There's a lot of those around. Or there are certain parts of the world where women can't work. And these screenshots all happen to be from, well, two of them are from the yachting industry anyway, which is common for sharing cabins, and it has to be male for cabin arrangements. Happens a lot on small workboats as well, especially UK sector domestic workboats is quite common. The top screenshot I literally took the other day from a LinkedIn post from a woman in Nigeria, and she's now talking about large commercial vessels where, same thing, companies wouldn't accept women on vessels. And that I know from a lot of people, a lot of women have faced that. I remember quite fondly, I had a job interview with Saudi Aramco. I'd been trying to get an interview for this position for about 2 years, primarily out of sheer devilment probably, and kept getting knocked back from recruiters because no, it's for men only. And then obviously one recruiter hadn't realized that I was female. I think I took my picture off my CV and I got the interview. So I went along and I faced this panel of Saudi Aramco interviewers, which was pretty much like a firing squad. It was like a very, very intensive orals for 2 hours. The recruiter said it was twice as long as any other they'd ever had for that position. Turns out I passed the interview, and they were going to give me a job, and I was quite chuffed. I'm still quite chuffed at that, in fairness. But then came the kicker, where they said, "Oh yeah, but you'll be in the office only, and we'll find you appropriate tasks." Which the job was an offshore marine inspector, so I sort of did query how that would work. They said, "Oh well, of course we can't send you offshore because you are a woman, you know." So suffice to say, I did politely decline that job offer. But at the same time, I think I want to sort of start ending this on a positive note, that what a seagoing job means to a woman is exactly the same as what it means to a man. We enjoy the same starlit nights, the dolphins in bow waves. We get the same channels before we're going home. We feel the same isolation from being away from loved ones. We get the same highs, the same lows. But we get a few extra lows that perhaps some men don't have, which is, I'm guessing, why we ended up with an International Women in Maritime Day, just to acknowledge that that is the case. I was very hesitant about this day. I really wasn't sure about it. I'm still grappling. I'm not 100% sure I like it. However, it did make me reflect that there are now so many organizations and social media initiatives that are raising the profile. And the IMO has had one of their strap lines for this day has been visibility. And for sure, just thinking the last few years, visibility of the fact that there are women in the industry has grown and grown. So I took some sort of screen grabs of the initiatives that I could think of, and there are plenty more, I'm sure. I mean, the IMO has 6 or 7 local sort of geographical associations. I've just put AWIMA there as an example for the Arab one, because it's one that's often quite overlooked. One of my mentees, I'm very proud of her. She's Mauritius's first female marine engineer. She was speaking today for the WMISA IMO Women Association. So super proud of her for that. So does the IMO Day and all these other initiatives show progress? I think it probably does. If it raises the profile, raises a bit of awareness, talks like this, perhaps it is a good thing. I will take it as a good thing. I'm trying to stay positive about it. I'd be interested to know your thoughts, to be honest. And then my final slide, because I'm sure you're fed up of hearing me by now, is just a bit of background as to why I agreed to actually do this. And in my mind, this Women in Maritime Days actually got nothing to do with me. The sad thing is, I was flying back from Kuwait the other day, and I realized that in much of the world, this day is not even going to be noticed. Then the seafarers and shipping companies in a large part of the world are not going to notice this day. They are not plugged into the same social media avenues. It just plain doesn't feature. It's not going to reach the places that, in a way, it desperately needs to, but it is reaching some of them. The ships that I was on in Kuwait 2 weekends ago, some of the crew hadn't been able to get off their ship and get home in 4 years. So they are under MLC tonnage. They do not fall under MLC rules. Even before COVID, their contracts were 2 years long, but almost all of them had not been home since COVID started. The only woman most of them had seen in 4 years physically was me coming on board to do their inspection, which to me, as I was flying home, really put it in perspective that, there's a long way to go. So in many parts of the world, diversity is not even an issue that's on the awareness radar at all. And it's easy for a lot of us in the West, myself included, to roll our eyes when I've looked at LinkedIn a little bit too much today, and it just seems to be just filling my feed. And I can feel pretty fed up, and it's feeling like it's shoved down our throat. But it does make a difference. And The two pictures I've got here are quite poignant in different ways. The left-hand picture was a South African lady called Akona Gervaiser. You might remember her name. She was found, her floating body was found the day after she was reported being raped on board the container ship that she was sailing on back in 2010. And she was 19 at the time. And so that's the sad side of it. On a happier note, Pakistan Nautical Institute branch has asked other branches to know that Pakistan is not behind the curve, and despite their cultural and local customs issues that they struggle with, they are proud to report that this lady on the right-hand side here is the first female nautical science HND cadet in Pakistan. So I'd like to think that we are making progress. The picture in the middle is for an unknown woman, because I realized that I suspect why this day came about was partly because of the bravery of Midshipman X, who raised her story last year, and it got quite a lot of press in a number of places. So I believe she's not played anything but a large part in how this day became formed, and the IMO decided to do this. And there's a lot of Midshipman X's. There's a lot of ladies out there that we don't know about, that are not in the limelight, that we can be very, very proud of, that are battling to do their jobs. There are a lot of men that are championing, they're supporting, they're true allies to women in maritime. Gordon, I'll embarrass you now by saying you are definitely one in top of the list of people that I think of in this. So I think I put it on a personal LinkedIn post earlier today, and I'm going to reiterate it again. To me, this day is as much, if not more, about the men and women who support women in maritime than it is about anything to do with being a woman in maritime. And with that, I will stop having to have you listen to my voice for far too long. Apologies if I went over time, Gordon.
No.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for presenting to the Nautical Institute Southwest of England branch. You're an absolute inspiration. And although I know you virtually across many forums, being an ally for empowering women, it's really great that you could take the time out to present that to us. And of course, this day, like you mentioned, the inaugural IMO International Day for Women in Maritime, I believe, like you do, that it's about sharing those experiences, bringing it to a wider audience, so that in the future, the cadets of today won't go through, and I won't even call them hassles that you have, because I know they're more severe than that. So on a note that it should be a celebration day, I just want to acknowledge and thank you for presenting today, because when we discussed after Midshipman X about doing a Seaways article, one of my shipmates is a trans woman. I had women on 10 fingers, and I thought, right, I wanted to do it from a male perspective as an ally and supporting women, but I wanted to get a female point of view. And of the 10 serious good friends, shipmates that were women that I knew of, I knew that there would be a trigger incidents if I approached any one of those 10, and that was the first 10 I know of, and that tells you something. So although all the statistics are saying that we're still only 2% of women are serving in the maritime, and as Gillian mentioned earlier today, that was the same 40 years ago when she started. So bidding for the 20%, not the 2%, is one thing. But we can also, I think all of us appreciate that disproportionately then, with that lower percentage, women are far more greatly effective when all they're trying to do is their job at the end of the day. So thanks for that. I know we'll have some Q&A, but if I may, I just wanted to highlight a couple of your points on your presentation. One was the PPE. And I know Aberdeen in the offshore industry, which I'm more affiliated with, obviously, are doing a whole range of sizes. And would you believe they're actually doing some really good trade now? Because like the Malaysians and Filipinos that I work with, most of those are looking for the small sizes, and they're looking for the small boots as well. I wanted to go back to your picture of you in a boiler suit with your pink hard hat, because I think we discussed that once before, where I was on a drill ship and all the environmental officers and the drillers on that geotechnical work were women, and they all pitched up with pink helmets. And for the first day, they were taking a bit of stick. So I decided as the client rep that I would wear a pink helmet in support as well. And they soon shut up then. So I think it just shows you that it takes sometimes a bit of leadership, you know, and how to treat people with respect and be a decent human being. And if it means putting a pink hard hat on to be one of the club, you know, all the guys that were making all the derogatory comments were suddenly the odd ones out. And then it was a couple of days later and they all wanted a pink hard hat as well. So we told them tough, there's not enough to go around. I also work in an industry where we do have significantly more women. I have a Belgian and a Brazilian superintendent on the contract side for Yandanol working with me, and the two marine mammal observers are Taiwanese women. Of a crew of 135 as an average, it's still not a great percentage, but I've made sure on the vessel that there's no excuses for cabin arrangements or toilet facilities and things like that. So I think as we move forward, and I'm on a 30-year-old vessel, you know, so there's none of the excuses that you know, it can only be done on the modern vessels. It can be done on any vessel. So I hope that the future holds that women will be accepted. And I know, like you've mentioned, culturally, some nationalities have some even more difficulties with that, where I think it's only recently the Saudis have allowed women to drive cars. I said the same thing to my wife anyway. But yeah, it should be a celebration day. So thank you for everything, for what you've shared. So I don't want to take up any more time and ask anyone to raise their hand. If you want to put your camera on so I can see your hand, or unmute yourself and ask Anne any questions, that'd be real great. Thanks, guys and girls. Yeah, Mike, please unmute.
Yeah, hi, evening, everyone. Yes, and thanks for your frank and somewhat shocking talk today. Your honesty was very brave, I must say. I'm a surveyor. I work in Dubai, and I'm familiar with a lot of the issues that you face as you know, as a man. It must be 100 times worse for a woman. And you know, there's been times in my career when I've thought, you know, why am I doing this? I want to give up. And you know, it's just terrible to think what women have to go through in this industry. But as Gordon says, it is changing. I go offshore a fair bit of construction projects. The last one I was on in Mozambique, almost 10% of the women on board, and over 100 were women. So that was good to see. And as far as I know, they're all treated very fairly. So, you know, hopefully things will improve. And you know, I support the efforts that are going on in the industry at the moment.
Yeah, I certainly hope so. It's always interesting for me to see the cultural differences. Funnily enough, one of the pictures that I shared throughout my career, I think, was me driving an FRC in Mozambique, quite possibly, which is one of the last places I worked before I came ashore. So I've got quite fond memories of Mozambique. But yeah, I have to say the Gulf states were all quite interesting. It was a bit of an education, and certainly gawking and things like this weren't just restricted to the maritime industry. I remember once I was in IKEA in Dubai and decided I need to go to the bathroom, and had the security guard at the edge of the bathroom tell me that, oh no, this is the ladies, you need to go to the men's. I said, well, I am a lady. And he went, but you've got short hair. Yes, I've got short hair. So, and yeah, even in supermarkets, it's not super short. It wasn't super short then. It was probably a bit shorter. But yeah, I used to have even small kids sort of pull on their mothers abayas and things like this, and point to me because, well, sometimes admittedly I was in my PPE and I'd come straight from a survey, and you don't get many people in Dubai Mall wearing PPE, I suppose, and especially not as a female doing their grocery shopping. But yeah, I was seen as quite odd on some occasions, and yet sometimes it really drives me, and I think, well, this is great. We're breaking barriers, smashing ceilings, all the other sort of corny metaphors you can think of. But yeah, there are some days where I have to say, why am I still doing this? I do get those days. I'm not invincible, that's for sure.
Yeah. And my wife was a member of the Missing Underwear Club as well when she went to sea, so can empathise on that one. Okay, well, I hope I'm going to see you in July at the festivities, the 50th. I'll be coming to the UK. I look forward to meeting you then, Anne.
Fabulous. I look forward to it. Yeah, I will be there. I've still got to book my travel and hotel, mind you, but I will definitely still be there.
Thank you, Mike. Does anyone else have any questions?
Yeah, Anne, can you hear me? I'm at the back there somewhere.
I can.
I'm it's quite interested. I think one of the things that happens with this presentation is you're sharing. You talked about this communication, and I was taken back. I've just finished a book by a wife of a third mate who, there's a couple of them self-published now, but she went to sea back 40 years ago. And a lot of the issues that you've raised, she's raising in that book that she's done. And if I go back to 50 years ago, my wife came away with me when I was her third mate. And I suspect if she's a couple hundred yards away in the flat, but she would echo some of the thoughts you had and some problems of a young female, very young, 21-year-old third mate's wife on board a ship, sailing with a crowd from the UK at one time, which was difficult, and then Indians and others, because of the cultural differences in the places we went. And a lot of those, so it's not just the crew members, but also those people who 50, even I think at the time when I was a cadet and there was a second mate's wife on board, and the problem she had 60 years ago, they were still there, but they're not well publicised. And I think now we're getting those books being self-published by these people, mainly because of their experiences, not complaining, but they're part of it. Things like, you know, what did you do when you ran out of contraceptive pills because you'd been on for longer than you expected? And then she had to go up, the third mate's wife got to see the captain to sort something out, just as you spoke about. And those are happening then, and the lessons, trouble is the lessons won't get learned if they're not out in the open.
Yeah.
I think that's what we need, is to get more openness about all these issues, because they're there. Many of us here, I guess, have experienced them or come across them or whatever, but they get swept under the carpet a bit. And I think what you're doing now, what you've just done, is open up that a bit more, and hopefully other people say, oh yeah, we understand that, we sympathise with it. There is a problem culturally with a lot of countries. And a lot of
I have to say I really appreciate that, because it certainly it has taken me 20 years to realize that actually, as uncomfortable as it is, and as much as it feels contrary to how I believe at just wanting to be accepted as a seafarer, not a female seafarer, I'm seeing the power in sharing stories, sharing voices, it not being taboo, sharing it in a balanced way, obviously, which I hope I tried to do tonight. I know certainly one of the Safer Wave stories that we have on the website is from this male that was at sea in, I think, the 50s and 60s. And that to me was quite powerful, realizing that, you know, this isn't a modern problem. This isn't a gender problem. Yeah, unfortunately, there is a long history of this. And I'm actually, just as I say that, I realize I've got Joe Stanley's book on my desk, From Cabin Boys to Captains, 250 Years of Women at Sea. I was using it to raise my laptop earlier. And there is such a long history of this. And just your anecdote there reminded me, I won't say it quite as I normally would, because it's, again, we're well before the watershed still, but I had a captain on one of the first ships I was on, and his wife came on board with him. And I remember we got the telex through, so that says in itself how long ago it was, to say that this captain would be joining in Antwerp with his wife. And I was with the second mate when the telex came in, and he read it and he went, oh, and I was like, okay, why? Is the captain bad? He went, no, the captain is fine. But his wife, she has a lovely pair of, you can fill in the blanks. And I was a bit taken aback by that. And it turned out that half the crew knew her quite intimately. And that presented certainly a very awkward situation for her. And, you know, whatever she did before she married the captain is obviously entirely her choice. But the fact remains, she joined this vessel where she knew that a lot of the crew saw her in that way. And I could see it was particularly difficult for her. I mean, unfortunately, I was going through some particularly difficult stuff on that ship as well. It's not one of the ones I put up as a photo. So it was difficult for me to empathize. And I was only still 16. I turned 17 on that ship. So I was 16, 17. So I didn't have the skills either in how to deal with that. One of the sort of projects I'm involved with on the side at the moment is there's a whole working group of us trying to review the PSSR syllabus to include psychological safety into the syllabus, and also helping to give tools for all seafarers in how to deal with general psychological distress and difficult times. And I'd like to see that rolled out into things like ship security officers courses, ship captains medical courses, because these are issues we've had for years. They are not going away. And I showed the photo there of Akona Gervaiser, whose body was found. She reported being raped on board, and then the next day the captain was arranging for a meeting between her alleged rapist and him to discuss what had happened, which of course is totally an unacceptable way of doing it. But at the same time, we have human element and leadership courses, we have all these new training requirements in, but I have not met many captains who say that they feel equipped to deal with that sort of situation if they were faced with that. So to me, we've got to face this from a lot of angles, and a lot of that is just realizing that there are these situations that exist, and by talking about them, we can see the scale of the problem and realize that things need to hopefully be done.
Thanks, Anne. Yeah. Andre, thanks for joining us. I'm sure your time zone isn't too good for you, but
it's absolutely fine, Gordon. It's 7 minutes. It's 14:07 here. I'm in Texas. Yeah, just about to head offshore. And I was going to ask you a question, but you've pretty much answered it in that in your last few comments. First off, thank you very much for the presentation. Thoroughly enjoyed listening to you. I've been at sea over 40 years now. Over 20 years in command, and I'm absolutely horrified that we've allowed this to take place and done nothing about it. I think the biggest problem, and what you and people like you, particularly Gillian, as our president, has done, is educate us over the last 2 years. I can't believe what I've learned about all these things over the last 2 years, and how much more in tune I am looking for this problem and perhaps how to deal with it on board the ships now. So I thank you most sincerely for that, and people like you for what you're doing. And I look forward to working with you in the future, because it mustn't stop now. As Gillian hands over the presidency, it mustn't stop the good work that you've done. So we must take it forward. My question to you was, what can we do? Because we're not psychic on board the ships. The men on board the ships are not psychic. We want to help. We want to be allies. We want to do our best. What would you say to people is what do we do to take this forward, in your opinion?
Thanks for your kind words, Andre. Almost, I would say that Gordon's better placed in this, because he really has been leading by example, I think, from certainly what I've been hearing in terms of how he's being an ally. I think keeping an open mind is one thing. It's very easy for all of us. We stay in our own bubbles. Gordon mentioned that his trans female crew member, and I've learned a lot from some of the things that she's shared in blogs and social media, and I had never considered the sort of difficulties there. I'm in touch with another Nautical Institute member who's neurodivergent, and we're talking about how to make the industry more inclusive for neurodivergent people, and trying to make the industry appreciate that there's actually skill sets that neurodivergent people that can really benefit our industry. So I think a lot of it is broadening our horizons outside of sort of our immediate bubble, and then trying to work out how we can support what we can in our spheres put in place. I mean, I sent a WhatsApp to Gillian quite late last night in bed saying, I've suddenly thought of something we can do in the Nautical Institute here. We're trying to change IMO and PSSR, and it's going to be a long process, and we will succeed, and we will do it, and we are doing it, in fact. But I said, hang on, I've just realized that we have the Command Diploma Scheme. And in that Command Diploma Scheme are a lot of elements to do with soft skills and leadership.
Fantastic.
And I went through the sort of syllabus, and I picked out 2 areas that it suddenly just came to me that we could give examples of. How would you deal with this if you were captain on the ship when this happened, with obviously preparatory material about fight. I've said it actually in I think another presentation I gave, and I don't try not to give too many, about the fact that it took me 30 years before I realized that there's more than just a fight and flight response, and there's freeze, and there's flop, and there's friend, and I didn't know this. And this is somebody having gone through trauma, and I hate the word trauma, and I don't normally put it in the same sentence as myself, but having gone through things that weren't particularly so good, I didn't realize there was anything other than fight or flight. Now, if I knew that before, for example, if it was in PSSR or some other course, medical first aid courses being a classic one, mental first aid, sorry, then not only would I have been able to help myself and had tools to help myself, but I would also be able to help others and shipmates that I'm sailing with to understand different trauma responses. I know there are certain colleges in the UK that are starting to give mental health first aid training as part of a cadetship. I would like to see, for example, the MNTB take this on board and have this as an expectation across the board, because we don't know what we don't know at the end of the day. And I'm all about the fact that we need to equip everybody, from the person first going to sea right the way through to the experienced master, who may well have had these problems on board his or her ship, but wasn't aware of them, because it's not the sort of thing you publicize. Yeah, a lot of what I went through, nobody on board knew about, apart from obviously the people doing it. So it's all about spotting the signs, having and creating that sort of atmosphere where you feel empowered and equipped, so you are able to intervene and get help in the first place.
All right, thank you very much for that. And I take on board what you say about the Command Diploma Scheme, because I'm heavily involved in that as one of the examiners, and actually was part of the team that put it together, the second version. So thank you, I'll take that forward.
Well,
All I'll say just in closing is know that I'm going to be there for you as well. You know, help me if you would, please. I'm going to need your help and everybody else to take this forward, but we are there to do it together. Thank you.
That's very much appreciated. And I was just about to say that certainly if you're interested in making changes, adding this into the Command Diploma Scheme, then I'm more than willing to help drive that and come up with suggestions and be involved.
Can I just make a comment? In today's times, an obituary to a Rear Admiral, I don't know his name, I didn't really read the article, but he was the first captain of the ship's first ship, which females were actually on, has been sort of taken on board for the Royal Navy. It would seem to me there's probably a lot of work that the Royal Navy have done, which might be of help to resolve the problems that are there in the commercial world.
Certainly there is. I mean, thankfully, the charity that I volunteer for, Safer Waves, we actually have 2 people who are involved with sort of the Royal Navy sort of pastoral care side. And I also know somebody else who was on a course the other day about sexual trauma, and they were dedicated Royal Navy personnel purely to deal with sexual trauma cases. Now, you could argue it's sad that we need those people in the first place, but the guy that I was speaking to that was on the course with them said that he was just so buoyed up by the fact this is the first time he's seen the Royal Navy actually actively acknowledge that yes, there is a problem here, and there have been some very serious problems, and they are wanting to turn the tide, and the measures they're putting in place. So certainly that I've heard from a few sources lately, they're really starting to get a handle of this. And there's certainly a lot of collaboration. I know certainly with our very small charity, we are talking to them, we are talking to the police who want to respond better. Certainly there was a case on an RFA vessel, I won't say where, but there was a case on an RFA vessel not so long ago, not in UK waters even, and the UK police force flew out to help investigate that case on board, which we think has to be pretty much a first, I would consider. So certainly there seems to be more sharing between the services and also merchant side. So I hope this will continue.
Thank you, Anne. Andy's got his hand up there with a question.
Hi, Anne. Thank you very much for your talk. That was absolutely excellent and recognise a lot of those situations from my time at sea. I really just wanted to throw in, I work and volunteer in the sail training industry. I'm up in Largs at the moment on our small boat with my wife, and we had some friends on board, including a lady who is in charge of Ocean Youth Trust up here in Scotland at the age of 28, managing 2 sail training vessels. She was in on one vessel with quite a number of young people with very special needs on board the boat. They're part of what's called a cashback program, where monies recovered from criminal activities are put back into community projects. They've got 24 weeks sold this year through the cashback program, which is just tremendous, taking very challenged youngsters. They have a very high level of female sea staff. And last year I assessed a new skipper for a boat called Prolific, Ocean Youth Trust boat down in the southern area. And she passed very successfully, and her first and second mate on board were a lady single-sex couple, and they did a fantastic job. They were an excellent team, and we had a good week. In the sail training world, there's quite a lot of young people come through and get Trinity House bursary schemes to take them through their certificates. I don't know the numbers, but I would be surprised if that's not at least 50% female. So what I take away from this is the majority of the room here of us white-haired, pot-bellied, middle-aged men, we've been through that era, but I do take a lot of hope in the younger people coming through. Don't see the problems that are related here, but they're not problems to them because that's the world that they live in. And I do take heart that there is a lot to do, but the younger people coming up just have a different attitude to life than the older folk of us have, and the challenges that we've had and you ladies have had in the past. Working in the offshore industry as Gordon, I'm a hydrographic surveyor working as client rep offshore. We are often on vessels with quite a number of ladies, and there are still challenges, but I just like to say there is a positive way forward, and I think the younger element coming up will lead forward on this, and I have a lot of hope that all will be well there. But thank you very much for your talk, and I'd certainly recognise and have experienced as a male, you know, a lot of the issues that you mentioned. So thanks, Anne, that was great.
No, thanks. I do certainly share your optimism that I think it is getting easier and it will continue to be. Tinged with a little bit of, every time I think that the younger generation it's going to change, and it's going to change dramatically, and I like to stay optimistic. I then also think of one of my mentees who on a UK university maritime campus only last year was told by fellow classmates that women wearing shorts were just asking to be raped, and women should never be on ships at all in the first place because they're also asking for the same thing. And the fact that that was on a cadetship course on a UK campus in 2021 really did depress me somewhat. But there are lots and lots of positive stories as well. One of my mentees, another one, funnily enough, just did a couple of weeks as a cadet on Tenacious, talking of sail training vessels, and had an absolute ball. I am living my life vicariously through her. Her photos were absolutely fabulous. I wish I'd have had half of those opportunities. And certainly on that ship, she had no problem. It's not to say she's also been immune from problems. She's had some as well on different ships, but certainly I would like to think that as society generally is changing, and the fact that sort of violence in general towards women is becoming less taboo, certainly in Western society, and I think that's creeping into other societies as well, as the sort of Pakistan branch president has tried to say very, very proudly, so I saw his mail. We're getting there. There is progress. It's not as fast as probably any of us would like. It's not going to save, unfortunately, a lot of women, especially that are going to unfortunately have some very painful things happen. But slowly we are going to make a difference. And if we get empowered seafarers, we train people, we support those, we put as much as we can in place within all our individual spheres, whether that's a nautical institute, whether that's at IMO, whether that's at flag state level, individual company level, or even just as mentors. We can all influence the sphere in which we are in to make this a better place for women coming up, I believe. And as long as I continue to do that, then as much as the negative stories bother me, Rome wasn't built in a day. Society itself is always unfortunately going to be like that. Violence against women is one of the oldest things in the book. We are sadly seeing it in Ukraine. It's not a maritime problem, but the more we as men and women can try and help make it a thing of the past, or at least try and support it when it does happen, and make the industry generally safer and just generally more inclusive. Think simple things like having emergency supplies of sanitary products on ships in medical chests. I can't believe it's 2022 and we're still talking about this. So yeah, just those little things to start making women being on ships become more of a norm rather than an unusual practice. I was talking to somebody actually today about the MLC saying that we should have PPE that's in a range of sizes, including for women, and the person said, oh yeah, but we don't have any women on our ships at the moment. And I said, well, I don't want us to wait until women work on those ships before suddenly we say, oh, hang on, we better put some small size PPE on board. I'd rather we accept from the start that, hey, it might only be 2%, but we want that number to increase, and it's chicken and egg perhaps, but let's try and make this industry attractive to women in the first place, and make women that are breaking through feel like they are not the odd ones out, and we'll get there. And certainly events like this, and Gordon even suggesting this as a topic, as much as I was hesitant at the time and tried to rail against it, I think it's probably one small step.
Thank you.
Thanks for your question, Amy. We have now well exceeded our time, and rightly so, because there's been some great questions and inspirational responses from you, Anne. So thank you so much for that. As we said,
say something quickly, Gordon?
Yes.
Anne, I saw your LinkedIn post earlier, and I know there's a lot of senior females in maritime that fully agree with it. They don't fully support these sorts of campaigns, but listening to your hard-hitting and honesty probably meant more to me tonight than 20 years at sea when I've worked with females. I think, like Andy said, I've worked with a lot of females and it's almost normal. Haven't actually experienced those problems. Maybe it's a generation thing, and also maybe perhaps the better offshore vessels rather than the Far East trampers, perhaps, where a cadet would have issues maybe. But from your honesty, by giving this talk, I've probably learned more than any social media campaigns that's going on around the world today, blocking timelines. So, I know you didn't want to do it, but thank you.
Fabulous. That really means a lot. I almost didn't do any LinkedIn posts today, and then felt better of it and thought I probably should. So did a little bit what to say. To that I would say quite simply that quite a lot of the really bad stuff did happen on deep sea vessels that were not sort of A-grade company vessels, let's say. But at the same time, there were also some pretty bad things, and I try and play them down, but probably quite significantly bad things that happened in one of the world's largest companies. You saw the blue hull boat there, so well respected companies. Certainly Midshipman X again was the same large well respected company. I think there's a lot that goes on that's not perhaps seen. I come back to the missing underwear thing. That seems to happen whether even on cruise ships where there's arguably hundreds of women, sometimes even more than that. Super yachts is another industry that's really starting to concern me. Speaking to this is one woman yesterday, their normal helpline for seafarer, the Seafarer Crew Helpline, sexual harassment is something like 14th on the list of concerns seafarers call about. For their yacht crew helpline, it is the second most prevalent issue that crew phone about. And again, it's sort of one of these more unseen industries. So there's definitely an industry type thing. There's definitely a caliber of ship issue as well. That is for sure. But yeah, certainly I'm starting to realize that the stories that we do see and hear about are perhaps the tip of the iceberg as well. But I do really appreciate your comments. I've been a little bit overwhelmed by the LinkedIn feed today. It just seems to have dominated a little bit too much. So I really appreciate that.
Well, thank you very much, Anne. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Have a tot of rum. That's what I said there.
I won't tell you what's in the mug then.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. We'll say good night. Thanks for the
Cheers.
Northern Institute Southwest of England branch. Cheers.
Fabulous.